Here then, gentlemen, sportsmen all, is your guest speaker. We proudly and humbly present Dr. Bill William Alexander.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you a lot. Thank you very much. And I've been introduced 18 times in the last 8 days, but Allah, Henry, Allah. By the way, did you know they had at last discovered how you can tell when a Texan is lying? You look at the ears, see if they're twitching. You look at the nose, see if it's quivering. Then you look at the lips, and if they're moving, he's lying. Another reason I'm not going to make a long speech is because, Red, I learned early in my ministry to have terminal facilities. And, Father, when I heard that prayer tonight, I saw you did too. I was in the University of Tulsa at the time. I went down to my church, and I expected a full house, and there was one man in the audience sitting right out about where you are, my friend, and he just sat there. No one else came in. I didn't want to waste my one sermon on one man. I only had one. Finally went down to him and said, look, my friend, I'm just a young preacher trying to get started, and I'd like to know, do you think I should preach this sermon, or should I just dismiss the service right now, being as you're the only one here? And he said, well, I ain't very well educated. I wouldn't know. I'm just a cowhand. All I know is cows. Of course, he said, I do know that if I were taking a load of hay down to the pasture to feed the cattle and only one cow came up, I'd feed it. So I went ahead and preached. Took me about an hour and a half, and I gave it everything I had, and I kept looking at this guy, wanting a little inspiration. He just sat there, no facial expression whatsoever, sort of like you. He just sat there. Finally, I finished and went down to him and said, look, my friend, I'm just a young preacher trying to get started, and I'd like to know, was the sermon all right? And he said, well, I ain't very well educated. I wouldn't know. I'm just a cowhand. All I know is cows. Of course, he said, I do know that if I were taking a load of hay down to the pasture to feed the cattle and only one cow came up, I'd be damned if I'd give it the whole load. So I'm not going to try and give you the whole load tonight, but it's a wonderful thing to be here for just a lot of reasons. Another reason I'm happy to be here is I like the way you men laugh. You know that? And by the way, there's a lot of religion just in laughter. I make no apologies for my silly stories. I'm very serious about this. I think one of the greatest crimes ever perpetrated upon humanity in the name of Christianity, and I think the good Father will agree, is the idea that you have to look like you're advertising a coffin factory somewhere or use your lower lip for a lap robe in order to be a Christian. The truth of the matter is that Jesus was the most radiant person who ever walked the face of the earth. Young people liked to be around him, and that wouldn't have been true had he been a deadly, dull, gloomy sort of person. So I make no apologies for my silly stories, which reminds me of another one. I haven't tried this out on anybody yet, but it appeals to my sadistic sense of humor. The guy who rushes into the hospital to see his friend who is dying, the doctor meets him at the door and says he only has an hour to live. The guy rushes into the room, tears running down his cheeks, leans across the bed and says, is there anything I can do for you in your last hour? And the guy says, yeah, get your foot off my oxygen hose. But I didn't stay up 2 nights, gentlemen, to tell you silly stories, although, as I said, I make no apologies for them. I came here primarily because I wanted to talk with the most important group of people probably that could be gotten together in this fabulous Calgary about a few of the ideas upon which I happen to think the future of mankind depends. I might as well make it clear at the start that I'll probably say some things here tonight that will not be popular. I'm not here primarily to be popular. I'm here because I believe in something. And all that I ask is that you give me the benefit of the doubt as far as sincerity is concerned. I don't think it's necessary to say to this intelligent a group that we're living in the most perilous, dangerous age of mankind's history. You know that. You've heard it often enough. We've developed an atomic, a bacteriological, a biological, a hydrogen warfare that can blast us off the face of the earth. That's never been true before in history. It's only within the last few years that we've learned at last how we can all die together. We have not yet learned how we can all live together. May this not be the sequel that we are all cremated equal, and for the first time that's possible. Last summer I had the privilege of being the guest of the Secretary of the Navy of the United States on taking a cruise on the Bonhomme Richard, one of our larger aircraft carriers. It happens that all the planes on that ship were equipped with nuclear weapons. But even then I was amazed when our skipper, Captain Brush, they called him Fuller, of course, told me there was, now get this, more destructive power on that one ship than in all the destructive power of mankind from Genghis Khan through World War II. I mean, it's a frightening thing. If I had nothing to believe but what I read on the front page of my paper this morning, I'd wish that I didn't have 4 children to grow up in a world like this. I said to my older boy, Ralph, who, by the way, is preparing for the ministry at TCU. My other son is now at the University of Oklahoma preparing for the ministry. I said to Ralph a few years ago, have you decided what you're going to do, what you're going to be? He said, well, you guys have taken care of that, haven't you? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, Dad, tell me the truth. Doesn't it look like cannon fodder all over again? And I had no answer for him. And some of you say, well, surely you didn't stay up all night getting here and going home to tell us a discouraging story like that. And the answer is, no, men, I do not come with a discouraging message, and there's only one reason. If you've missed everything else I've said, get this. I am not discouraged because there is one thing, thank God, that's more powerful than anything that has been discovered, is being discovered, or will be discovered in the laboratory of modern science. And what is that? You know, I've seen examples of it here tonight. It's that something within the heart and mind of an individual or a group, which when tied to an eternal truth results in a whole situation being lifted to a new level. It may be a 15-year-old boy down on a New Orleans dock seeing slavery for the first time. He turns to his dad and said, when I hit that thing, I'll hit it hard. And 50 years later, he sat in the White House signing the Emancipation Proclamation. Some of you say, well, become more specific. I want to be part of the answer instead of part of the problem. What can I do? I'm going to ask you 4 questions and sit down. And if you can answer these 4 questions in the affirmative, I guarantee that you'll leave here a richer person than when you came. Not because I asked them, but because they're fundamental in this business of adequate living in a day like this. Gentlemen, first of all, do you have a wholesome, positive attitude toward life? I never had a greater thrill of a speech than one time I was giving the commencement address in a Midwestern university. Afterwards, I was sitting there while they gave out diplomas. I think I've watched more diplomas given out than any man in America. And they called this one name, and I thought I saw 3 guys stand up, and I thought, what goes here? And I looked more closely, and then I saw 2 fellow students were carrying the one in the middle up on the platform to receive his diploma because he had no legs. 4 years before he had come to his first class, the professor called the roll, called his name. He said, here, sir. The professor said, stand up when you answer me. He said, I'm sorry, sir. I haven't been able to stand since I was 3 years of age. But with a wholesome, positive attitude toward life in a tough situation. So help me, I've never heard anything on a football field to compare with what I heard that night. And I'm from Oklahoma, Sam. I saw 8,000 people when he was introduced, led by his fellow students, and when he was presented that diploma, they stood to their feet, they clapped, they cheered, they yelled, they stomped for 13 minutes by the watch, paying tribute to a guy who, in a tough situation, kept a wholesome, positive attitude toward life. That's the secret of this organization. It's a wholesome, positive thing. You say, well, we have problems. Surely you have problems. Everybody has problems. I spoke to the National Funeral Directors of America down in Atlanta, Georgia the other day. They have problems. One of their biggest problems is how to look sad at a $10,000 funeral. Everybody has problems, but unless we attack those problems from a wholesome, positive attitude, we become part of the problem instead of part of the answer. Do you know the greatest enemy that the church has today? And I think the good Father will agree. The greatest enemy the church has today is not the atheist. Who follows an atheist, you know? The greatest enemy the church has today is the negative, gloomy, sour kind of Christian who may never miss church on Sunday, but who continually goes around looking as though they think they'll have a special seat in heaven if they eternally look and act like they have dyspepsia. You know what I mean? Well, maybe you don't have any in Canada. We have a few in the United States. I even have a few people in my own congregation who, bless their ever-loving hearts, I think they were born in the objective case. They always look like they've swallowed the box and thrown the aspirins away. I've never heard them say anything in a board meeting except, "You can't do that. You can't do that." They said we couldn't do this. This is a little brochure of our Church of Tomorrow. It covers 41 acres of ground. We've spent about $3 million out there, and we've got to spend another $3 million before it's through. 27 of the 41 acres entirely dedicated to young people, swimming pool, tennis courts, baseball diamonds, not just for the kids whose folks are wealthy enough to belong to the country club, but for all of them. And one of the boys from my youth centers up here in Calgary and one of your high schools now, Harry Hilburn back there, and he can tell you about this. And the future belongs to it because it's a positive program, you know. But there was quite a few people. You can't do that. You just can't do that. So help me, if I had my choice of living the rest of my life with that kind of a Christian, or a good, kindly sinner with a wholesome, positive attitude. So help me, I'd take the good, kindly sinner. In fact, I did. I want you to meet Mrs. Alexander sometime. Do you have a wholesome, positive attitude toward life? Gentlemen, do you have a self fit to live with? I know what some of you are saying to yourselves. You're saying, yeah, he's a preacher. Now we're going to have a spiritual message. Well, you can forget I'm a preacher for about 2 minutes and just let me ask you, do you have a self fit to live with, fit for yourself to know? So many people today trying to escape from life through drinks and drugs and detective stories and one thing and another. They're not bad people. They're just preoccupied with lesser things, you know? They're majoring on the minors. They're giving first-rate attention to second-rate things. They're not bad people. They just don't have selves fit to live with, so they have to use some escape route, like liquor, for instance. Do you have a self fit to live with, fit for yourself to know? My third question is this: do you have a world fit to live in? I hear a chorus of no's, and I can't blame you. Let's be honest about it. Do we here in Canada, in the United States, do we have a world fit to live in, even religiously, you know? Where right in America alone, we have 256 different denominations of Christians, and what are we arguing over? It wouldn't be so bad if we were divided over the great issues that, for instance, the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the infinite worth of human personality. But we're not. No, we're divided over little theological questions of which Jesus never even heard. If he were to come back to some of our church conventions and hear us discussing forms of baptism, the apostolic laying on of hands, which one of the 88 different theories of the atonement is correct, and there are 88, so help me, he would not know what we were talking about. And yet those are the things that are pulling us apart. By the way, speaking of baptism, did you know it's been so dry in Oklahoma, Sam, that the Baptists have been sprinkling? Did you know that? The Methodists and the Presbyterians have been using a damp cloth, and the Episcopalians and the Catholics have been handing out rain checks. I mean, seriously, some of you may not like this, but I'm going to say it. You know what unity means to me? Unity means to me that I'm going to put my right arm around my Catholic father friend and my left arm around my Jewish rabbi friend, and I'm going to say, you love my God and I love you. Don't let anyone make you small, legalistic, bigoted, dogmatic, self-righteous, pharisaical, holier than thou, to where you refuse to give the benefit of the doubt to the other person who is just as sincere in his belief as you are in yours. Or we won't have a world fit to live in religiously, you know. And by the way, I don't want to be misquoted. I love the church. I was offered $100,000 a year the other day for a good many years. And I didn't even consider it. You know why not? Because, gentlemen, I don't think there's any other institution in the world that can mobilize the spiritual power necessary to build the foundation upon which the world of tomorrow must stand, if it's going to stand, than the church. And I speak of the church universal. And I beg you guys, don't stand across the street and point a finger and say the church isn't getting the job done. Bless your ever-loving heart, get in there and pitch and help make it what it should be, you know? The best brains in our world today are in the field of business. Sure, we've made mistakes within the church. I think one of our biggest mistakes is the fact that for too long we've been inclined to say to young people, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other thing, without giving them a blessed positive thing to do like you guys are doing. Then we wondered why the honky-tonks were doing such a thriving business up and down our land, you know. Next to our old church in Oklahoma City, we had a youth center with the best bowling alleys in town, pool tables, ping pong tables. Upstairs, a beautiful lounge where the young people danced. Of course, some of my more conservative brethren called it Alexander's Pool Hall, but I never saw one unwholesome thing take place in that youth center in 15 years. Not one. I'm so sick and tired of hearing people say, our young people are just going to hell. You know, if they are, we've posted the way pretty well for them, don't you think? But I've spoken to more young people than anyone in America in the last 15 years, high school, college, and military. And by the way, I was just selected by the United States Air Force to speak to every United States Air Force base in the Far East and Europe. I'll do that as soon as we get this church paid for. I started to say I was so sick and tired of hearing people say our young people are going to. I've spoken to more of them than I guess anyone on the North American continent. And let me tell you this. Our kids today, they're basically clean. By the way, they're a lot smarter than we were, too. They're basically clean, they're basically moral, they're basically honest, and more than anything else, we need to believe in them and let them know that we believe in them. And we're not going to do that by standing off at a safe distance saying, naughty, naughty, don't do this, don't do that. That's why I believe in this program with the Booster Club. It's a positive program. The dirtiest, filthiest piece of literature I ever read in my life was written by a minister in Shawnee, Oklahoma, against dancing. No fool, I've been around. It was rugged. The average young person isn't even capable of getting their mind as low as that guy's was who wrote that article. I mean, he shouldn't dance. This man really shouldn't. That's the truth. And some of you say you're making a mountain out of a molehill. No, I don't care whether you dance or not. That's neither here nor there. I don't think it's wicked for guys your age to dance. I've watched you. I think it's pitiful. But gentlemen, when will we learn that the question is not, are young people going to dance? Willy-nilly, whether you want it or I want it or not, 96.5% of them are. The only question is, where are they going to dance? Some filthy honky-tonk with the worst associations in the world, or in our youth centers and gymnasiums and barn dances and homes with the best associations in the world? That's the only question. Do you have a world fit to live in religiously? We can have, but we need guys like you. I don't care what name's on the outside of the church. Get in there somewhere and pitch. Do you have a world fit to live in politically? My aching back. Mayor, did you know that I ran for United... Mayor, I want this clearly understood. I did not tie that first statement. I was asking you a question. Did you know that I ran for the United States Senate in Oklahoma in 1950? Did you know that I got enough votes to win any off-year election in the history of Oklahoma? Except that one? I think the mayor will agree with me in this statement. We'll never have a world fit to live in politically as long as people like you, who represent the best we have, are willing to sit off at a safe distance and smugly say, oh, politics is dirty, I wouldn't touch it. Sure, some politics is dirty, but brother, it'll never get any better until some guys like you, who do have a sense of integrity, are willing to get down on your hands and knees with a scrub brush and a scrub pail and help to clean up the filthy mess in the Republican and Democratic parties, the conservative and the liberal parties. And we'll never make it any better until you care enough. Because your country, as well as ours, was made great in the first place by people who cared. And when you sang, "Oh, Canada" tonight, It did something to me down here, too, you know. I don't want you to think I'm bitter about my Senate race. I'm not at all. I had a lot of fun. Mayor, one guy came up to me, he said, I wouldn't vote for you if you were St. Peter. And I said, brother, if I were St. Peter, I wouldn't need your vote because you wouldn't be in my district. That's the truth. I must close. Gee, you've been a wonderful audience. If I've talked too long, it's your own fault. Let me just say this before I leave this point. No matter how black things are without, gentlemen, remember this, you can always have a world fit to live in if you have a self fit to live with, can't you? You remember John on the Isle of Patmos, a prison isle, the last place in the world he wanted to be. But even there he heard a voice that said unto him, Behold, John, I have set before thee an open door which no man can shut. I don't know about you, but I want that in my life. An open door which no other person, no circumstance can shut. I call that door fellowship with God. I don't know what you call it, but I know it's real. And you can have a world fit to live in if you have a self fit to live with. Which brings me to my last question. And I can't thank you enough for being so very kind to me and so warm. It's been one of the great privileges of my life to have been here today. If these others have been $64,000 questions, this last one is a $128,000 question because it helps answer the other three. If you can answer this last one in the affirmative, you will have a wholesome, positive attitude toward life, a self fit to live with, and you'll help to build a world fit to live in. Gentlemen, do you have a philosophy fit to live by? Some of you say, oh, it doesn't make any difference what you believe, doesn't it? Mister, you tell me what you believe, not what you give lip service to, what you really believe. I'll tell you what you are. Mister, tell me what you believe, I'll tell you what you'll be 10 years from now. And you see, I'm not ashamed to say this. I think Jesus Christ knew more about living at its best than anyone who ever walked the face of the earth. And I get a little sick and tired sometimes of hearing businessmen say, oh, the preacher talks ethereally, way up in the clouds. Way up in the clouds, my neck. It's the most practical philosophy that ever came down the pike. And I can tell you the businessman or the salesman in the long run who'll do the greatest increase of business in Calgary during the next 10 years. Want me to point him out to you? It'll be the one who most nearly approximates, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. He that would be greatest among you, let him be servant of all. Inasmuch as ye do it unto the least of these, my brethren, ye do it unto me. This thing will work. Bud Wilkinson is my very close personal friend. He's a great guy, too. I mean, I'd just soon have my two boys under Bud Wilkinson, our football coach, as any guy I know. He builds men. And Bud told me this story, and I'm going to close with it. It was told to him by Lou Little. You remember, he used to be football coach at Columbia. And before that, he was at Georgetown University, Father. And it was while at Georgetown that the president of the university came up to him one day and said, do you know so-and-so, named a certain boy? Lou said, yeah, he's been on my football squad for 4 years. He's never been able to make the first team, but he's a fine boy. And he said, well, we just received some very bad news. His last living relative, his father, died. And we want you to break the news to him. You know him better than we do. And Lou said, well, I'll try. And he went up to the boy's room, and he broke the news as best he could. And then he said, the president told me to tell you that he knows it's a long way to your home. And if you want to take off for a couple of weeks, you can make up your classes when you get back, get things straightened up at home. Your place on the football squad will be waiting for you. So the boy left. That was on a Tuesday afternoon. On Friday of the same week, when Lou Little went out for football practice, here was this kid all suited up, ready to play. And the coach says, how come? Well, he said, we had the coach said, I thought you were going to be gone a couple of weeks. No, he said, we had the funeral yesterday, and I flew back last night, and the reason I flew back, coach, is I just got to be in that starting lineup tomorrow. It's our most important game of the year. We win it, we win the conference championship. I just got to be in that game. And the coach said, well, you know that's impossible. It's not only our most important game, it's our toughest game. I need my 11 best boys out there. No, he said, you put me in that starting lineup, coach, and you won't regret it. And the coach said, well, I'll think about it. And the next day he made up his mind what he'd do. If in the flip they were to get the kickoff, he'd put this kid in. He couldn't do too much harm on kickoff. Then he'd jerk him after the first play. And that was the plan, except for one thing. When the dust cleared away down about the 7-yard line, who had nailed his man down there with a beautiful tackle, except this kid who hadn't been able to make the first team. The coach thought, well, I'll let him in one more play. To make a long story short, that boy played 60 minutes of football that day, and he played like a demon. Offense, defense, downfield blocking, tremendous. They finally won the game, mostly due to his efforts and an intercepted pass that he made. So afterwards, the coach walked in the locker room. He said, after these other guys have left, I want to talk to you. The boy said, all right. So the other guys showered and dressed and left, and he sat on a bench across from this kid, and he says, look, I'm a football coach, and I don't believe in miracles. He said, we won that game today primarily due to your efforts, and yet in 4 years, you've never been able to make the first team. How come? The boy said, well, Coach, you didn't know my dad, did you? No, he said, I saw you walking arm in arm across the campus several times, but I'd never met him. And he said, well, you see, Coach, for many years, my dad was totally blind. And today was the first game he ever saw me play. Now, gentlemen, I'm not trying to be sentimental, but you know the real reason I'm here, and I'm knocking myself out across the country. The real reason I'm here, and I'll be in Flint, Michigan tomorrow night, and back in Oklahoma City Saturday, and preach Sunday, and be in Los Angeles Monday, is because I want to say to as many people as I can, especially leaders like you, I want to say one thing to you. Just don't forget, in this day of Sputniks and Mutniks and intercontinental ballistic missiles and what have you, that there is still that which is eternal in our universe. See? And even though many times right seems to be upon the scaffold and wrong upon the throne, still behind the shadow standeth a God who is not dead, keeping watch above his own. I want to say to as many men as possible, be not afraid. Now, I don't want you to hide your heads in the sand. I want you to face life, but I want you to remember that there is such a thing as an eternal philosophy with which we can ally ourselves and be bigger than anything that comes up against us. And just remember that the final decision about our universe is not going to be made by the Politburo in Moscow or 10 Downing Street. It's not going to be made by the Congress of the United States or even the United Nations, which I believe in. In the last analysis, it's going to be made by the same one who controlled outer space long before Russia or America ever orbited a satellite, you know? Some of you say, preacher, you're dreaming. We can't build that kind of a world. And my answer is, and I close with it, and thanks again for being so kind to me. Dreams, are they? Oh, but gentlemen, don't you realize that they are God's dreams? These things I've been talking about. That men shall cease from their hating, that war shall soon be abating, that the glory of kings and tyrants shall pale, that the love of humanity shall prevail. Dreams are they, but they are God's dreams. That men shall love one another, that white shall call black man brother, that selfish greed for itself's sake shall pass from the marketplace, that man will meet his God face to face. Dreams are they, but shall we despise them and scorn them? God's dreams? This is my last statement. I believe in the future. I'd rather be alive in the next 20 years than any 20 years of mankind's history, even when Jesus walked the earth. You'll see civilization itself made or broken. And I believe in the future. I don't think it means the doom and destruction of mankind. You know what I think? I think it means the dawn of a new day where free men will walk free earth and breathe free air, where your children and grandchildren and mine will have a better chance for the good things of life than even we have had. And you know why I believe that? Just one reason. Because of guys like you. I guess I've spoken to as many of you as anyone in the country. You have your faults? Sure. I have more than my share, I know that. But I think I know you. I know you pretty well. And I believe in the future because of you, because I think you're the kind of guys who will begin where you are. In organizations like this, I think you'll help to make God's dreams come true. God bless you.